All the second stage tanks now pressurized. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Meyer.
Stereotypes are not okay. Unless you're talking about dumb jocks. Bunch of jerks.
HBR Talk with Hannah Wallen. Victim identity cultists have engaged in a slander campaign against men's sports, with their toxic masculinity narrative playing a major role. By now, we're all familiar with the woozle claim that domestic violence incidents increases during the Super Bowl, and the fact that knowing it hasn't kept the establishment media from repeating that claim annually for over a decade. When they're not citing woozles, they're creating new ones. Broadly came out with their Rapey report a couple of years ago, in which they included a list of players who had faced intimate partner and sexual violence accusations, whether they had been convicted, were still under investigation, had their cases dropped, or had been acquitted. 4 or 5 on their list had been. The majority of the so-called Rapey list wasn't even accused of sexual offenses. It didn't matter to the writers that their clickbait headline painted a group of men, mostly black men, as convicts, guilty of sex crimes that most of them weren't even accused of. It didn't matter that most of those on their list hadn't been convicted of the crimes they were accused of. They needed evidence of toxic masculinity, and they were going to make whatever they could find fit the bill. But it didn't fit. These things aren't evidence of toxic masculinity, but an aspect of toxic femininity. The use of women's tears, or even the hint of women's tears, as a weapon in a gynocentric attack on men's independence from female influence. Men's sports are not a target because of what they are, but because of what they're not. They're not about women, not subject to women's approval, not designed for women's benefit, and not under women's control. That attitude and that gynocentric attack have far-reaching impact. Sports programs and franchises are in the rare position of being expected to police the relationships of people who are their assets, and they're expected to use the guilty until proven innocent standard. If a subordinate asset is accused, a superior asset can be disciplined for failing to penalize the subordinate on the basis of that accusation, regardless of any circumstances. Imagine you're the manager of a fast food joint. One of the shift leaders has been privately accused of a crime, allegedly committed somewhere else, that didn't involve the workplace in any way. The alleged victim has complained to you instead of the police. You're expected to take disciplinary action against your shift leader, and if you don't, there will be disciplinary action against you. Sound ridiculous? On Tuesday, December 4th, Ohio State's head football coach Urban Meyer announced his retirement at only 54 years old. This announcement hails the end of an impressive career. With an over 90% win record as the Buckeyes head coach, including all 7 games versus Michigan, 3 Big Ten championships, and the addition of the 2014 national championship as OSU's head coach to the 2 national championships under his belt from his tenure coaching at Florida. Why now? Retirement is pretty unusual when a winning coach is still in his 50s. According to ESPN.com, Meyer cited the cumulative effects of health problems, the current strength of the Buckeye program, and the impact of a lengthy suspension to start the 2018 season. On October 30th, it came out that Meyer's incurable progressive arachnoid cyst, a brain condition he's had all his life, has been flaring up in a way that surgery isn't going to help as it has before. This kind of cyst is abnormal growth of the arachnoid mater, the middle of the 3 tissue layers that make the spinal cord and brain an intact system. It can cause extremely painful headaches and can lead to more serious symptoms. This past season, the flare-ups were apparent enough, at one point causing him to collapse on the sideline, that the coach felt compelled to publicly disclose and explain his condition. So what was the role of his suspension? That had to do with a controversy from earlier this year. OSU suspended him over accusations that he knew assistant coach Zach Smith was accused of abusing his wife, and did not fire him for it. He was suspended without pay from August 31st to September 16th of this year, despite stating that he had no knowledge of the issue, because Mrs. Smith claimed he did, partly on the assumption that his wife, who she talked to, must have told him. Meyer was suspended essentially for two things. He didn't take action in response to allegations against an employee before they were handled in court, and he wasn't sure of the details of an employee's marital conflict when interviewed about them during a time when his cyst and its related symptoms were worsening. According to ESPN, Meyer did not draw a straight line between the suspension that started his season and the increased pain that played out upon his return, but he did say that the suspension contributed to his decision to retire. However, earlier this season, when he publicly talked about his condition, he did state that it wasn't going to force him out of coaching. So one of two things has happened in relation to an incident that shouldn't even have involved him. Either Meyer's career has been cut short because the strain of it exacerbated his ailment enough to make it handicapping, or the incident took away 3 weeks of, and tarnished his memory of, what was to be his last season as head coach for OSU. Either way, it's a rotten deal. Then there is former 49ers linebacker Reuben Foster, whose career has also been severely disrupted and may end because of domestic violence accusations, this time made against him by his ex-girlfriend Alyssa Ennis. Ennis first accused Foster earlier this year, claiming he broke her phone and assaulted and injured her. She later admitted to prosecutors that she had lied out of anger because he said he wanted to break up with her. She admitted that she had done the same thing to a previous boyfriend under similar circumstances. She admitted to having stalked Foster and having stolen cash, personal property, and personally identifying financial information from him in an attempt to ruin his career and execute what she called a money scheme. She further admitted that injuries she cited as evidence of his abuse were actually sustained in a road rage fight she had with another woman, a short video from which had been posted online. Ennis claims she came clean about her lies because she felt that things had gone too far and she wanted to do the right thing. But take that with several grains of salt because she only changed her story after that video was brought to her attention. On October 12, police were called to investigate a loud argument between Foster and Ennis. Body cam footage released by the department shows officers questioning the pair and placing Foster in a patrol car. It's pretty obvious from the footage that Foster's placement in the patrol car was determined before officers ever questioned him, as they maneuvered him to it and restrained him, despite his calm demeanor, before even beginning the discussion. In the video, Ennis told police that the two argued after she took Foster's phone and found things that upset her, an indication that she was the one who started that fight. Foster was not arrested, but neither was she. On November 24, Foster was arrested on new accusations by Ennis, who called 911 to claim that, surprise, he had broken her phone and slapped her. The next day, the 49ers announced his release from the team. As a result of this new complaint by a woman who has previously admitted to frivolous 911 calls, filing false complaints, stalking, theft, attempted identity theft, and attempted fraud, the Santa Clara County DA's office is considering reopening the previous case against Foster on the basis that these new allegations lend credence to those previously admitted lies. The Washington Redskins have picked Foster up following his release by the 49ers, but the offer has conditions. On November 27th, the team released a statement saying Foster will have to go through the full legal process, an investigation, and potential discipline by the NFL, as well as meetings with counselors associated with the team before he can even put on a jersey. This, again, is all just based on accusations, despite his accuser's profound lack of credibility. Why? Pro football players are assets, not students for whose benefit the program exists. If a woman's tears mandate workplace punishment without process and management is responsible on penalty of their own jobs, accusations like those Alyssa Ennis made can not only be career enders for players, but also for coaching staff and anyone else involved in the team's management, right up to the owner. It's even codified. Section 8.13 from Article 8 of the NFL's Constitution and Bylaws authorizes the league's commissioner to determine an owner's conduct detrimental to the welfare of the league or professional football. If the commissioner doesn't find the available sanction for the offense adequate or sufficient, he may refer the issue to the NFL's executive committee, which has the power to compel cancellation or forfeiture of the member's franchise in the league, with a directive to sell the team. They could have done this to Carolina Panthers owner Jerry Richardson had he not chosen to sell the team of his own accord while he was under investigation for sexual and racial misconduct in the workplace. The NFL isn't the only sports franchise to have this. Remember, former LA Clippers owner Donald Sterling was banned from the NBA for life, forced to sell his team, and fined $2.5 million after private recordings of him arguing with his girlfriend were made public and immediately decried as racist. Athletic clubs and professional franchises really ought to change their policies surrounding intimate partner and sexual violence allegations in light of stories like these. Their players and staff members deserve greater due process considerations.
I'm sorry.
Additionally,
sorry I'm late.
The legal system needs to recognize the damage being done here. A coach's career shouldn't be ended because he didn't act on an unconfirmed domestic violence allegation. That is wrong.
Okay.
It's wrong whether it can be proved that he knew about the accusation or not, and it's wrong whether the accusation later turns out to be true or false. If Mr. Smith assaulted his wife, then Mr. Smith assaulted his wife. Coach Meyer did not, and he's not responsible for Mr. Smith's actions. Coach Meyer is not the police, nor a prosecuting attorney, nor a marriage counselor. He is a football coach. If Mrs. Smith wants to play defense, she should talk to the coach. If she wants someone to help her deal with an abusive intimate partner, she should talk to the police. If she needs help developing the guts to go talk to the police, she should seek counseling from a professional counselor, not her husband's boss, and certainly not by funneling the question through her husband's boss's wife. OSU should apologize to Coach Meyer. Reuben Foster deserves recourse as well. An athlete's career shouldn't be kept in limbo by unproven allegations, especially those from a source nobody can reasonably trust. Alyssa Ennis lied and committed serious crimes. She felt so entitled to Foster's affection and attention that she tried to use criminal acts of her own and manipulation of state power to punish him for considering leaving her. That's sociopathic. And yet, her next round of accusations are being treated as credibly as if she were an innocent kid. As disgusting and damaging as her initial abuse was, what she has carelessly set off now is even bigger than that, and it could get much worse now that there are two teams involved. A woman's accusation against anyone involved in a professional sports franchise can have far-reaching, devastating consequences for the accused and all of his colleagues. This is one of the issues with inflating society's sense of women's innocence, trustworthiness, and vulnerability. The resulting protective attitude turns an individual wrong, what she may think is a sledgehammer she's swinging at one guy, into a dirty bomb she's launching at an entire profession, in which not just her target, but everyone is vulnerable to her attack. There has to be an end to this, and it has to begin with the liar being held accountable and her target given recourse against her lies. If Ennis is lying again, and my money is on her story being false given its similarity to the previous one, it will be a gross miscarriage of justice if she does not face court-ordered punishment for all of her lies. She'd be an admitted repeat offender. That should involve the maximum penalty available under the law, and it should be publicized so that other potential liars know the potential consequences. Women who make a battlefield out of love and then weaponize their tears in the form of false accusations need to get the message. Lie like this, act like this, and you can be the one who does jail time, ends up with a criminal record, comes out owing fines and with a ruined reputation. Don't want that? Don't lie. No need for anything complicated. No heavy lifting, no emotional labor, no mess, no fuss, no problem. Just don't lie. Is that really too much to ask? Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 64, Weaponizing Women's Tears, in the oh-so-professional environment of Honey Badger Radio. I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with Nonsense Annihilator, Lauren B., and she who must be obeyed, Karen Straughan, to smack down yet another female victim narrative. But first, a reminder. As you know, the social media gulag is ever expanding, which is one reason why we've diversified to multiple platforms. We're on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and we have audio-only formats. The Badgers, we are everywhere. So if you want to be able to keep track of it all, remember to go to badgerfeed.com and register to receive notifications. After all, with all those non-shadowban shadow bans, you need notifications from badgerfeed.com to tell you what we're doing. Also, last but not least, don't forget to like and share this and other Honey Badger live streams so they'll have more social media visibility, even when women's tears over our non-feminist perspectives get used to try to shut us up. The solution to social media throttling is to use 1,000 whispers to reach every ear that's been closed off from one muffled shout. That's our end of the balance of power. But it won't work if it's not exercised. And speaking of exercise, it's time to kick off this discussion. Let's tear into it, ladies. But before we do that, I'm gonna razz Karen. You're late.
I'm sorry, and I didn't even have a chance to listen to the opening monologue.
I know.
Because, it's life gets in the way.
Yeah,
sorry.
It does. And it probably helps now that I've made the show an hour earlier in anticipation of moving to a place that I'm not going to get to move to now. Now I don't know where I'm going to be moving to, so we're going to keep it this way. But it does throw everything off. But I'm going to read all of the Raz Karen super chats. The first one was... Do it!
The
first one was before
Get me
Karen.
Good. But pay through the nose.
No. I do not want snot on my money, thank you. The first one is French Honey Badger gave us $5 before any of this and said, "Ree!" And that was because we were late. We started 7 minutes or 8 minutes late. Xeranx gave us $5 and said, "Karen talking during the movie." Special level of hell, Karen. Special level.
I'm sorry. I didn't realize that we'd started. I thought everybody was waiting for me.
So for the audience, when the video is playing, it's playing through a thing called SciTube. I don't do the phone call like the Doge does. I use SciTube, and so if it's not open on Karen's computer, she can't hear it. And so we were listening to the video, and you guys were listening to the video because I can play it through OBS, but she couldn't hear it. So when she came in, she could see us in the chat, but she couldn't hear the video, and so she thought we were waiting. But French Honey Badger gave us $5 and said, "Karen barges in the show with her muddy boots." And
my boots are not muddy, and I also don't own any boots.
See, I do. I have boots.
My boots
Canada.
Were made. How is that possible?
My boots
I literally I wear shoes that have just essentially a stretchy cloth upper, and I wear them all year round, and my feet don't get cold. So,
see, I have feminist butt kicking boots. You gotta kick feminist butt with your boots, so you know.
Steel-toed, yeah.
Yes, and they've got to be boots because if you have fabric, then the feminist bullshit gets stuck in the fabric, and you have to wash your boots. And I can just hose mine off, so my boots are superior to your shoes. I have established footwear dominance. I probably have bigger feet too. Lord of Swarm,
I'm almost positive. Yeah.
I have bigger feet than most women, my height. Lord of Swarm gave us $5 and says, "Karen makes the show at least $15 just by interrupting the intro. This woman has the Midas touch."
Everything I touch, it's the reverse Midas touch. Everything I touch turns to shit these days. So
I don't know. Okay, so the razzing of Karen is over. We have properly victimized her.
What? I demand more super chats, criticizing me, lampooning me, lambasting me, and essentially telling me how ridiculous I am. I demand it, and I am she who must be obeyed. So
there you go, guys. Now you have to shout out with your super chat bullwhips and just totally tan Karen's hide. So we'll read them off if you send them. But back to our original topic. So I chose those two sports events, or two sports incidents, out of many actually. It's a very common issue especially in pro football, where you see a guy gets accused of something, and particularly he gets accused of domestic violence, and it's all over the news, and he's guilty before there's even an investigation, and they want him suspended or they want him off the team, and all of the feminist websites are attributing it to toxic masculinity, and attributing toxic masculinity as the main aspect of sports, and talking about how football has to change. And every year they trot out that woozle, domestic violence increases during the Super Bowl. It doesn't. But even if it did, correlation is not proof of cause. So there you go. So go ahead and tear into it, ladies.
All I gotta say is, there I think there probably is a certain type of woman who is attracted to a certain type of man, and that even in cases where there is violence, and the Ray Rice situation would have been, a perfect example of that, that women are not always these innocent victims in these particular circumstances. That they will engage in extremely provocative behavior. That if it was a man provoking another man like that, everybody would be cheering them getting punched in the nose. So essentially what we have is like this huge double standard. Somebody sent me on Twitter today. Let me just find it briefly. It's who would you say is the abuser in this situation? And it is it's a video of somebody named a streamer named Mr. Deadmoth, right? And he's streaming. He's playing a video game. He's streaming live, and his girlfriend comes in, and he keeps telling her, "I'll be out in a few minutes. I'll be out in a few minutes. I'll be done in a few minutes. I'll be done in a few minutes." And then she starts throwing things at him. She starts hitting him with objects, and you can't really see what she's doing, because she's off camera. But you can see him blocking things she's throwing at him and things she's trying to hit him with. And then finally, after about 3 minutes of her throwing things at him and hitting him with things, he gets up and he slaps her. And then at that point, she bursts into tears, which is like the typical response of women. "Oh, I can't believe you did that," right? "I can't believe you retaliated with violence to my violent behavior," right? And then she starts to then berate him. So her tears dry up very quickly, and she starts to angrily berate him for doing that and saying, "You can't do that. You're not allowed to do that. Blah, 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 blah. You're not allowed to hit me," and all of this stuff.
She used a specific
and
term,
I
too.
only watched a couple minutes of this particular clip, and I was just like, yeah, that is the typical. This is not untypical of female-initiated domestic violence. They initiate the violence. If they were a man, everybody would see it as provocation, of an escalation, of a physical confrontation, right? And they would see the person being hit, but with objects and having things thrown at them. They would see that person being completely within their rights to retaliate with an escalation of violence, right? And yet women feel like they're immune to this kind of thing. And I think that in a lot of situations, just as with the Ray Rice situation, you have a situation where there are certain types of women who are attracted to really, really, really high status men, and attracted to them based on their high status. And then they will engage in that kind of provocation. They will engage in that kind of initiation of a physical confrontation. They will provoke and provoke and provoke. And I mean, like, I'm looking at this this video. Mr. Deadmoth's girlfriend, even after he hit her, did not seem in any way whatsoever to be living in fear of what he would do. She was essentially, her response to him hitting her was to cry for, I don't know, maybe 15 seconds or something like that, and then go right back into aggressive mode, go into a dominant, take a dominant stance, and essentially try to tell him how things are going to be. And I'm sorry, but that is not what we have been led to believe domestic violence is, right? What we have been led to believe domestic violence is Julia Roberts hangs the hand towels in the bathroom improperly, and her husband beats the shit out of her for it, right? That's what we've been led to believe is domestic violence, and is every domestic violence situation. She burnt the toast. She dribbled coffee on the tablecloth. The dinner wasn't ready right when he got home. It was either not quite done yet, or it was done 5 minutes before he arrived, and so it was cold, and so he beats the shit out of her, right? That's what we are led to believe is the paradigm of domestic violence. That is not what these situations are. And it's particularly not what these situations are when it comes to women who are attracted to men who are dominant. Women who are attracted to men who are dominant are often domineering themselves, and they often play an integral role in provoking situations, in escalating them, and in essentially engaging in physical aggression themselves in such a way that eventually the man retaliates, in the way Ray Rice did in that elevator, and in the way some men end up doing when they've been pushed to the point where they feel like where they lose control of themselves, right? So I mean, like, the entire way that we're looking at this problem is completely fucking bogus. This is not a matter of, and I wouldn't, like somebody asked me on Twitter, in this Twitch stream guy, right? Who do you think is the abuser here? And I'm like, I don't know. Here's what I do know, right? I don't know whether either of them would fall into that category of domestic abusers that are coercive and controlling and are really just waging a campaign of coercive, violent, terrorizing and control over the other partner. I don't know whether that's the case with this particular couple in this particular situation, right? The only thing I do know is she isn't scared of him.
Yeah, that's something that our society is not very good at figuring out the difference between a woman who is in fear and a woman who is upset. And a woman who is upset isn't necessarily in fear. She isn't necessarily intimidated. She hasn't necessarily been victimized. She's just upset.
She might be offended.
Yeah.
She might be offended. How
she might
dare
be
you?
offended, yeah. But
how dare you? And the whole idea of being able to say, how dare you?
Yeah.
How dare you? If you were in a position to say, how dare you, sir?
Then
right?
You're not...
That implies that you are in a superior social position.
Yeah. You're not being dominated. Now, in that particular instance, one of the things that I noticed hearing the audio from that was that she used a specific term. She called him a woman basher. She used the popular in her country, the popular term. Here it would be wife beater, or and I, it makes it seem to me like it almost, the whole incident almost sounded like it was staged on her part. And it doesn't mean that it was, but having been to court with men who were falsely accused, whose wives or ex-wives, soon to be ex-wives, falsely accused them specifically to use the accusation as leverage in custody and property disputes, I can't discount the idea that she initiated that, knowing that she would set him off, knowing that it was all on camera, knowing that eventually she could get him to snap and respond in exactly the way that would get him in the most trouble possible, so that she could go after him for custody and property in a divorce. And, or use that as a leverage in some other way against him. And it's not necessarily proof that that's what happened, and it's not me saying this is a definitive statement on this, but that's a possibility, and it's one, like I said, I can't discount it. I can't discount that she's basically pulling a Gone Girl on him, only a smaller way, and it's hard to feel sorry for a woman in a situation like that at all, and I do feel sorry for the couple in that they do not have good conflict management. They cannot deal with conflict without having that as their means of dealing with it. But I don't feel sorry for her specifically for his response to her abuse of him. I don't feel sorry for anybody who commits abuse and then gets hit back.
Well, I wouldn't even necessarily call because I don't know what led up to this. I don't know what the situation was prior to this, right? So I'm not going to say that what she did was abuse. I think that there's a difference. I think that there's a difference between abuse and violence, right? I think
I wouldn't call what she did necessarily violent abuse in the way that it's violent abuse when you beat the shit out of somebody, but nagging is abuse. It's psychological abuse, and that is what she started with.
I don't agree. I don't agree that nagging is abuse.
I do.
I don't agree that, and I'm not a nagger. Okay. So I literally am, I grew up in a household. My mother was like a class A freaking nagger. She was like a champion of nags, both in her persistence and her creativity in terms of how to nag. And she is, I admire it as a skill in terms of when it comes to raising children. My children are certainly, they live like total slobs and they don't have their shit together. And part of that is because I never nagged them. I never nagged my partners either, and I don't. But I don't see nagging as abuse. Necessarily abuse, right? I don't see it as necessarily abuse. I don't see violence as necessarily abuse. Sometimes violence is an in-the-moment response to conflict. Sometimes nagging is an in-the-moment response to your partner not doing what is necessary to make the relationship work. Sometimes nagging is an in-the-moment response to your children not growing the fuck up, right? Sometimes that's all it is. And, so essentially, I don't know what their relationship looked like before this. And I don't know whether this is a pattern of behavior with her. If it was a pattern of behavior that every time he goes and goes online and whatever, she starts to pester him and distract him and pull him away from that. And this was his time. It was demarked. It was marked out for him. Right. and he is he's supposed to be left alone during this period of time and all of this stuff, right? I don't know whether that was the case. I don't know whether he promised her he would do a bunch of things during the period of time that he was on stream, and she's essentially objecting to the fact that he's neglecting her and neglecting his promises. I don't know any of that, right? What I do know is that, and there have been times when I have engaged in violence with a partner. I have slapped the man I'm with now across the face during a particularly charged disagreement, I guess you would call it. I very much enjoyed the satisfaction of slapping him across the face. About 1/10 of a second later, he slapped me across the face, about 1/10 more forcefully than I had. And then I sat there and I thought to myself, I really want to hit him again. And I'm just kind of weighing whether hitting him again would be worth getting hit again. Because I know that if I hit him again, he's going to hit me again. And I don't think it'll escalate beyond what I choose. But is the satisfaction of hitting him again worth the price that I will pay in getting hit again? And I chose not to hit him again. And then we talked about it like adults. And I told him all of the things that were going through my mind in that moment. And he said, yeah, I saw your gears turning. I saw you thinking about hitting me again. Of course I saw that. Right? But that doesn't mean that that's necessarily a situation of abuse. That's a situation of conflict and people lashing out, but it's not necessarily, doesn't follow that pattern of abuse that we see as one party dominating the other, one party suppressing the other, one party subjecting the other to a campaign of coercion and control and domination and all of those horrible things. That's just two angry people getting physical with each other, and then figuring it out afterwards. And that is, ironically, the most common form of domestic violence. And you know what it would benefit from is a public health approach that focuses on couples counseling rather than a criminal approach that focuses on jailing the man because, hey, you know, as a woman, even though I hit first, you know, I'm immune from retaliation. Legally, I did nothing wrong, or I didn't do nothing wrong until he hit me back, and that's when it all gets blamed on him, right? So essentially, what I'm looking at is fallible people who engage in, who come into conflict with each other in their relationships, who sometimes engage in a type of escalation that is completely fucking normal. If we were watching it happen between two men outside a bar one night, we would see neither of those men as the victim, or as solely the victim or solely the perpetrator. We would see them both as we would do what the police officer did when he came across Nick Redding and that SJW who came across each other on the street, and the SJW recognized Nick Redding and started a physical altercation, and then Nick broke his nose, and then a cop comes along and tells them both to grow up and go home. That's what we would be doing with couples, you know, who engage in this kind of, I guess, mutual behavior. Is we would be either telling them to grow up and go home, or we would, you know, be telling them to go stand in opposite corners, or we would be telling them to go to a marriage counselor and figure out a better way to deal with their conflicts. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think something that's missing from that conversation is the fact that, people who are abused also have an addiction in some sense. Abusers and the abusees both are addicted to this that
The pattern.
yes, exactly.
Aaron
And
Pitsy said women who grow up in an abusive household want to live on a knife edge of fear and crisis.
yeah, you don't know any other way to live, so you're attracted to that. So there's something to be said there that, people who are abused, it's not that it's their fault, but they may have some tendencies that lead them towards these abusive relationships, so that's something that needs to be discussed as well. But I think blaming it on men, solely on men, and it's just absurd, because it's so obviously not true that it's one-sided. It is absolutely not unidirectional, how violence happens in a relationship. So also what I wanted to say is that I think what needs to be said is that a lot of women look at their lives and they have a plan. They have it all planned out. They're just looking for a man to fill that role, right? So they get that man, and then, everything's supposed to just happen naturally, and everything's just supposed to be all lovely and roses and work out wonderfully, and we're going to get married and have all these kids, and it's just going to
No
be
work
wonderful.
involved.
Exactly. And it does not take into account the fact that the man that you're marrying and having these children with, may not feel the same way that you do about the situation. He may not really be in it. He may just wanted to have been chosen and you chose him, but shit happens, things happen in relationships, and you don't know how you don't know how you are going to react when things happen in life, right? A person could die. You don't know how that's going to change and affect you. So when these huge life things happen, like having children and getting married, you don't know how it's going to change you. So I heard her, the woman, asking him to come down and have dinner, right? So to me, it felt like she wanted to have this family situation where the family is all sitting down to dinner. We're all engaging with each other. She wanted him to engage with the family. And he wanted time to do what he wanted to do. He didn't want to have to subscribe to the role that she wanted him to fill. And he resented her for that. But she just kept nagging. She just kept in. You're going to do what I want you to do, and that's going to be it. And if you're not going to do it, then I'm going to make you do it. And obviously, this is something that's been going on for a while, because I get the same, I caught the same thing that you guys both did when you watched the video. He just wanted peace, and she just wanted attention. He was not willing to give it to her, and she was going to get it by force. And I think she knew very well what exactly she was doing, because her words, I believe, were deliberate. And, the kids crying in the background doesn't make it sound any better. Who knows what actually happened with that, but there's so many, if you're not there, you can't say for sure what happened. So we're all in the same place of doubt when it comes to that. But I think what we have seen so far is paints enough of a picture for me to have a million more questions.
Yeah, basically to look at it as a potentially being a part of a pattern. And that's where I was looking at it from. And see, this is something
that's not. But here's the thing, right? Like a pattern of abuse and a pattern of conflict are two different things. There's a lot of overlap.
Nagging
right?
is a form of domination. Men can dominate through physical force. Women dominate through psychological force. And nagging is a means of psychological force. And it very well can be abuse. And I think in situations where it's used over and over again as a means of controlling somebody's behavior or controlling someone's ability to enjoy making their own choices, then it is as much abuse as using physical force to do those things. And that's what I'm seeing in that situation, and I'm seeing very serious potential for that being the case.
Yes,
the other thing is,
I can see that it could well be a pattern, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it is a pattern or that there's a history of it. It may well be that he's just been like 100% neglectful, for the last however long, and she's just had enough, and she's taking a stand. I have done that. I did that with my ex on a few occasions where, like I said, I'm not a nag, but then when I get it in my head that, we are going to hash this out. You are not going to ignore me anymore. Or ignore this anymore. So it's essentially, it's impossible to stick yourself in that relationship and take into consideration the entire history of what was going on. So I hesitate to condemn either of them. I hesitate to label what happened on either side as abuse. It is violence on both of their parts, and it is conflict on both of their parts, but it's essentially, you have to look at neglect as a form of abuse as well.
Oh,
right?
yeah, that can be abuse as well, but it doesn't change the fact that the nagging can also be abuse. And if you have a situation with habitual neglect and habitual nagging, that's as dysfunctional as habitual hitting. And I think some of this comes. I have a label for a particular pattern in women and to a degree in men as well. Beauty and the Beast syndrome, I guess I would call it, where the individual seeks out a particular personality type because of what it is about them that makes them sort of a juggernaut in the world, and then expects, but in my case, in my personal case, I'm going to be able to control the beast. Right, the beast is exciting and fun and beautiful and fascinating and handsome,
tame him.
Right? Yeah, but I can tame him or her. This beast will be a gentleman or a lady for me. And I've run into this with abuse victims of both sexes. And I hate to use the word victim in this case because it's not quite necessarily an addiction to the abuse, but it is an addiction to the personality type and a very dysfunctional response to the fact that the personality doesn't go on pause just because you want it to. And I've watched friends of mine date, beast after beast. Both sexes, again, date beast after beast and turn around and be just absolutely shocked when the dysfunctional beast aspect gets unleashed on them every time there's a conflict. And they will do exactly the same things that they watch triggering that beast aspect of the person in the world. They'll do exactly the same things that they see happening before she goes off on the clerk at the grocery store, or before he goes off on some guy at a sporting event or in a bar, or the clerk at the grocery store. And then they're just completely shocked that their partner goes off on them. And I've actually had one of my close friends from when I was a kid, a boy that I grew up with. I watched him go through girlfriend after girlfriend after girlfriend that had that sort of borderline narcissistic, everything is about me, look at me, pay attention to me, aren't I special, aren't I beautiful, aren't I spectacular, and any time things didn't go her way, jumping down the throat of whoever was responsible for how things did go. And then when he would get accused of things he didn't do, and when she would sick the cops on him with claims that, you know, he had hit her and all kinds of stuff like that, after she had so vehemently and viciously defended him against the last abuser, he couldn't understand how this woman had turned on him. And it was, you know, he didn't fulfill something that she expected of him. He didn't do something she wanted. So she split black on him, and everything he did was wrong after that. Everything, right? He was the bad guy, and now he was persona non gratis, and so now he was the target. And it took, oh gosh, like 6 or 7 women, girlfriends, wives, his ex-wife that he had children with, 2 ex-wives actually that he had children with, before he finally married somebody who wasn't fascinating and spectacular and star-powered and all that
exciting
stuff. Yeah. And, you know, he married someone who is kind and patient and loving and gentle and caring and strong. And his ex-wife threw a lawnmower at her. I mean, like, his ex-wife, I'm bigger than his ex-wife. Actually, I think Alison might be bigger than his ex-wife. And she picked up a push lawnmower, you know, the kind with the motor on top and the blades underneath and the handle that you have to shove. Picked it up and threw it because she was angry, because of some slight that had occurred. And yeah, that's what he got together with.
I think that what's the most sickening thing to me is that women know that men are chivalrous by their very nature. And they use that. They use it. Okay? They know that men are hardwired to care for women. They don't care. They use that. And then they turn on their men and say, I don't care. They use them as pawns, as like pieces in a chess game, as if it's just nothing. The only thing I will say is, listen, you want to play stupid games, you will win stupid prizes. Okay. If you want to, trick a man into getting you pregnant, and then you hear a headline in the news that some pregnant woman got killed because the father of the child was just, angst ridden behind the pregnancy. I kind of, not that I don't feel bad, but it's, you roll the dice, ladies. Don't play games with these men because you don't know what you're dealing with. And it's the same way on the other side. You can't trust all of these females out here because you don't know what you're dealing with. So I don't know.
No, I agree. Like there are men and women who are dangerous, who are extremely freaking dangerous. And one of the biggest differences between men and women is that women have this method of domestic abuse that they can exercise by proxy, in order to punish their partners for stepping out of line, for not being obedient, not being a subject to the dominance of these women. So, I mean, there was a case, Earl Silverman told me about it. And I'm not sure, he used to phone me way back in the day. And we'd talk for a few hours at a time. And he was telling me about this one case that he had been dealing with, where this guy was married to a woman, and she was horrific. She was absolutely fucking horrific. So anytime that he put his foot wrong with her, so if he smiled too nicely at the cashier at the store, or if he was late getting, took too long to go fetch beer and cigarettes, she would phone the police and say that he had hit her. And then he would be carted off to jail. And he would stay there 1 night, 2 nights, 3 nights, whatever. And then when it came to pressing actual charges and prosecuting, she would decide she wasn't going to cooperate, and the charges would be dropped, and he would be released, and he'd come home, and then she would just do it again the next time he annoyed her. Right. And then one day he comes home from, I guess, from picking up beer and cigarettes, and she's on the phone, and she tells him, "You're going to be sorry this time." And the next thing he knows, she's dead. He just lost his mind, and he killed her. And I would suggest that is better defense than the woman who pours gasoline on her husband while he's sleeping and lights the bed on fire, because there was no premeditation there. He just knew he was in for another beating, and he snapped. So you don't know what people are capable of when they're pushed to an edge like that, as victims, right? And you don't know what people are like in terms of their capacity to abuse.
And people don't realize what it does to a guy when he gets carted off to jail over and over again like that, unless they have actually seen it happen to someone close to them, or they have been that guy. And I talk about the 7 years in hell story all the time. That's the one I was able to document the most. But the guys I know who have had that happen to them have both of the ones that have had the really long-term instances. The lawnmower guy, his went on for over 15 years, and 7 years in hell. He had a better lawyer. He had a better opportunity in the legal system, and his went on for 7 years and ended with a vexatious litigant ruling, civil case. So the legal system, the criminal court system, didn't stop his ex, even though she demonstrably broke several laws in terms of making those false accusations. But both of those two guys have symptoms of PTSD. 7 years in hell guy has a diagnosis. And there are things that have come out of that. Like he's basically disabled. He cannot hold a job because he cannot trust his environment in the workplace. And he cannot... He psychologically cannot go into a work environment and remain there. In addition to the false accusations that she made that got him arrested, and in addition to stalking him at home and stalking all of his witnesses and attempting to use the court to get further information that she could use to more effectively stalk all of his witnesses, his ex stalked him in the workplace, harassed him in the workplace, and attempted to use the rules of his workplace to get him fired. And so he was constantly in fear of losing his job and his income. And eventually he gave up the job because he couldn't do it effectively. He couldn't actually be in the workplace when he was in the workplace. And at the other end of it, my friend, my lawnmower friend, he went through job loss more than once because of things that his ex was doing to him in the workplace, including one mutual workplace, which I think is one of the reasons why a lot of employers will not hire the spouse of an employee, because if there is conflict, they lose 2 employees, or they bring the conflict to work and it screws things up for everyone. But But yeah, this situation, in both of those cases, those guys, their response was to get away from it, and they did everything they could to get away from it. But if you're in a situation where you can't, you're still married, you can be setting something like that off. And there have been both men and women who have killed in that circumstance because their partner didn't recognize or didn't care what they were setting off. You get to a point where you can intimidate someone to the point where they snap and go the other direction, and there is no fight or flight. There's just fight left.
Yeah. No, and one of the things too that I want to bring up in the context of this discussion is the case of Nicole and Michael Ryan in Canada here. I believe they were in Nova Scotia. Might have been New Brunswick. But they were a military couple. Both of them had military careers. And she had a history of violence, including assaulting several members of her extended family at a family reunion. Sorry about the noise in the background here. And also attempting at one time to run her own sister over with her car. So she had a history of violence that was on record with police. And he had no such history. And they got divorced. Borat, come on out. Oh, my God. Just take him by the collar and take him out of there. Oh, my goodness. Anyway, dogs. I'm sorry. Anyway, so she had this history of violence. She was known to police because of it. He had no history whatsoever. When they divorced, he got custody of their daughter, who was, I think she was like 7 or 8 at the time. And he got full custody. And then he immediately moved hundreds of miles away to get away from his ex-wife because she was violent. And then she attempted to hire a hitman because, the divorce was going to go through. You have to go through a 1-year waiting period and then everything gets finalized. And so she hires a hitman. And the first guy she hires essentially just took her money and laughed and ran off with it and said, "Screw you, what are you going to do about it?" And then the second time she attempted to hire a hitman, the guy that she talked to was an undercover cop who recorded the whole thing. And during the discussion in the car, when they were talking about the hit, she was very clear on the date that it had to be done by. It coincided with the date that their divorce would be finalized, where she would lose her right to inheritance over his pension, his military pension, and all of his assets. So she wanted it done before that date. It was very, very important. And he asked her, so what has he been hitting you or anything? And she's like, no, nothing like that. I just need it done. And so this was all on fucking camera. So she gets prosecuted for trying to hire a hitman to kill her husband. And he's sitting outside the courthouse waiting to be called in to testify. And the prosecutor didn't call him in because the prosecutor figured it was a slam dunk. We have this recording. She's saying to this undercover cop, who's the hitman, who would have given her a discount if she'd said yes, that he'd never hit her or anything like that. But she said on the stand that she was living in terror of this man, that he was stalking her, that he had abused her, that she had phoned police a dozen times during their marriage when he was beating her, and every single time the police had left her twisting in the wind. Okay, so she's made these claims on the stand, and because of the nature of the case, it blew up in the media. This poor abused woman was left twisting in the wind by Nova Scotia police, over and over and over again, until she had no choice but to hire a hitman to kill her husband so that she could finally be safe from his violence. even though he was living hundreds of miles away and had been given custody of their daughter by a family court. Okay, so anyway, so there was a federal inquiry launched into the response of Nova Scotia police to this woman's pleas for help, right? After she was acquitted, because she was obviously a battered woman. She was obviously a battered woman. She was acquitted, and the prosecution appealed the ruling, the verdict, right? A federal inquiry was launched in the meantime into how the Nova Scotia police had failed this woman, and that inquiry came up with nothing. She had never once ever called police for help because of abuse. Nothing ever came of this. It was just one big giant goose egg. She'd lied about being abused. She'd lied about the Nova Scotia police leaving her defenseless against this horrible, abusive man. She'd lied about everything. Okay, so the appeal goes through. The appeal is allowed. It gets sent up to the Supreme fucking Court of Canada, right? And they look at all of this information in light of this federal inquiry that came up with the verdict or the conclusion that she was lying. She was never abused. She had never called police, and so police never could not be held responsible for abandoning her, this abused woman, a woman who was being abused, right? All of this was finding of fact before the Supreme Court of Canada. And what did the Supreme Court do? What do you think they did? What do you fucking think they did?
I bet it wasn't the right thing.
They stayed the charges because as an abused woman, she had already been through enough.
Jesus.
Right. After there was evidence that she was not an abused woman. This is exactly the reason why I wanted to talk about this topic. Because here we have a situation where even when there is concrete proof that there is no reason for them, a woman's tears can be used to override a man's human rights. And that has to stop.
This is a man who would have been killed.
Yes.
For his military pension and his assets, for monetary reasons, for financial gain, right? And this woman was proven to have been lying that he was abusive. And the fucking Supreme Court of Canada, which is infested by feminists, mind you, decided that she had already been through enough. She had already been abused enough by her husband and by the system. And as an abused woman, it was really not fair to put her through another prosecution, so they stayed the charges. I was just fucking blown away by this, right? Fucking blown away. A federal fucking inquiry.
Yeah. And this actually, in the beginning when you were talking earlier, not this case, but the case of the woman who made false accusations over and over again until the guy snapped. What's happened in the United States, where our Supreme Court probably would not have ruled that way in the case that you just talked about. But our legal system, our legislators have passed policy.
Policy and best practices, yeah.
Well, the cops are expected. They're allowed, and they are expected because they are allowed. If a woman makes that kind of accusation to the cops and then doesn't follow through in court, that doesn't prevent prosecution. The cops can bring charges. The prosecuting attorney can go after the guy. If they cannot get her in there to testify, they just use what she told the cops as evidence, and he is then tried on testimony that has been given to the cops that there's no cross-examination because the woman isn't there to cross-examine. So she just never shows up, and she can't get in trouble for not showing up in court. So you can go.
She never gets in trouble for perjury, that is what it is.
It is perjury.
Swearing a false statement to police is perjury. Any kind of sworn statement you make where you take an oath that you are telling the truth, or you sign to that effect, an affidavit, a police report, anything like that. That is it's a sworn statement. And if you intentionally lie and knowingly lie on that, that is perjury, and women are never, ever fucking held accountable. There was another case in Edmonton.
Well, I want to add something to what you've said there before you go on to another case. Because there's two things that happen when women go in and talk to the police. There's official statements, and then there's what they have said to the cops, and the cops' notes on the case. Lying to police during an investigation is also a crime. It's a crime separate from perjury, but it is a crime, and that also is because if you tell a cop something and he documents that you told him that can be entered into court too. And we have in the United States, we have guys that are facing in court not just sworn statements from women, but cops' notes on what women told them, where the cop can be cross-examined, but the woman's not there and she can't be.
Yeah, well, what's hilarious is, criminal mischief extends even beyond that, even beyond things that you tell police. If I go on Facebook, right, or Twitter, and I say, this person assaulted me, and then a third party reports that to police, right? So I haven't told anything to the police, right? A third party reports that to police. I could be charged with criminal mischief because I have made a public accusation of a crime. It was reported to police. It was investigated. And then that results in a waste of police time, right? So it's criminal mischief. You cannot just go, well, okay, under the law as it is written, you cannot just go around accusing people of crimes without running afoul of the law as it is written. The law as it is enforced is very different. One of the best cases for this that I've come across was Soner Yasa in Edmonton. He was a cab driver. He was driving 3 women who were out clubbing. He was driving them to a nightclub, and one of them lit a cigarette in his cab, and he said, you have to put that out. You're not allowed to smoke in a cab. It's against the law. And then they started getting abusive with him, and they started hurling all kinds of verbal abuse with him, at him and all of that. And he said, if you keep this up, I'm going to kick you out of my cab. And they said, drop us off here. Oh, by the way, we're not paying you the fare. The fare was $14, right? And he said, well, then I'm going to call the police. And they said, go ahead. We'll just tell them that you groped us. And he said, okay. And he let them out and called police. And while he was waiting for police to come to get the $14 fare out of these women, they called their friends, who began to assemble on the sidewalk and form a mob of people. And they repeated their allegation that he'd groped them to their friends, and they started to menace this cab driver and become physically intimidating and verbally threatening, right, him with violence because of these allegations that he'd sexually assaulted these women. The cop arrives kind of in the nick of time, just when he was thinking that he was going to get his ass kicked, right? And these girls repeat the allegation to this cop. They say, he groped us, he sexually assaulted us, right? And then Soner Yasa says, I have a dashboard camera. I can show you what happened right here, right now. And he did, right? And everything happened exactly as I have stated it. Every single thing that happened, I watched the video with the girls' faces pixelated because, they need to be protected. And then, so the cop essentially just told everybody to settle down, go home. There was nothing to see here. Get lost, disperse. Soner Yasa wanted charges pressed against these women. The police refused to press charges, right? The next day, the young women phone the cops and apologize for the trouble and let them know that they won't be pressing charges against the cabbie.
Like they could. What charges could they possibly press after there was proof?
I know,
Oh my
but
God.
they phoned to say, we're really sorry for all the trouble. We don't want to press charges against the cab driver, right? But the cab driver phones the cops, files a police report, and says, I want charges to be pressed against these women.
And they won't do anything for him.
If I didn't have this video evidence, I would have been in serious fucking trouble, and my face wouldn't have been pixelated in the news reports.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? And they just absolutely refused. And these women, like, okay, they didn't perjure themselves because none of this was made in a sworn affidavit or a sworn statement to police. They didn't file an official police report where they had to swear they were telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, right? They didn't do that. They just told a cop on the sidewalk, you know, made a false allegation to that cop, right? So that doesn't count as perjury, but it certainly counts as criminal mischief.
Yeah.
Right?
And then there's the dirty bomb effect. You know, you have, again, here's one cabbie, right? One cabbie that's been through this, okay? But in the UK, cab drivers all have to have dash cams because of how frequently this type of incident has happened. Uber drivers in their forums, where they discuss advice for each other on how to more effectively do their job, they all have started talking about, in fact, a couple of years ago, they started talking about having dash cams because of incidents like this, where there's been accusations against Uber drivers, and there's been at least one Uber driver that has been jailed, that, you know, because of everything that's gone on with accusations against cab drivers, and it's women using their tears to get out of paying their fares.
One of the best examples of that was in Israel. If you go onto, there was a Russian Times video, a little story about it, and this woman, she's essentially saying, cab driver, drive me around, oh, by the way, I'm not going to pay you, and I'm gonna verbally abuse you. And he says, get out of my cab. And she calls the police and starts hitting herself and saying that he's attacking her, and he has a dashboard camera.
Yeah,
it captured the whole thing.
And this is common enough. Women expect to be able to use their tears as a weapon against individual cab drivers. It's common enough that it's affected an entire industry, that it has created an expense in the industry and a set of precautions that if you are male and you drive a cab, if you provide a service to the public, getting from one location to another, you have to have documentation to prove what you were doing during the time that you were providing that service, because it's your chances of getting falsely accused of some sort of an assault on a female passenger that you were providing your services to are high enough that it's a significant risk for you. Each time a woman makes an accusation like that, each time a woman uses her tears as a weapon to get away with, not paying her cab fare, she is hurting the entire industry. Each time a woman uses her tears as a weapon against an individual athlete, she is hurting an entire industry. She is essentially adding to the weight of false evidence that feminists use to demonize male athletes. Each time a woman makes an accusation against her gaming group, against her tabletop gaming group, or against her guild in an RPG, or against other guild or other players, other gamers who happen to be male, accusations of sexism, accusations of treating her differently because she's a girl, and things like that. They are hitting an entire, not just industry, but also a hobby area. And this is something that extends throughout men's interests everywhere. Professions, hobbies, any time that men do something for their own self-interest, not just things men do to relax, but things men do in general. Men cannot have their own spaces. Women have fought their way into men's locker rooms. Men and women have fought their way into, as journalists covering sports, into even so much as the shower area of men's locker rooms, and then have accused men in there of sexual harassment and sexual misconduct for being naked in the shower. Being, you know, how dare he be naked in the shower? Doesn't he know there's a woman in here in the men's locker room?
Yeah, how dare he walk around with his dick wagging?
You know,
it's so freaking ridiculous. You know, like the entire freaking thing. You know, like I have to give kudos to Jordan Peterson for asking for essentially answering the question: can men and women work together in the workplace? With I don't know. Maybe not. Because if this is what we're down to, is that a woman crying can turn the entire workplace and how it works into turmoil, and essentially put half of the workplace on notice that anything, everything, and nothing can get them into trouble. Right? I mean, like, one of the things that I found most interesting about, you know, like my guy, he used to be a volunteer on a crisis line, right? A suicide hotline. And he was booted out of there. And one of the reasons he was booted out of there was because there was a woman there who would, I guess she could dish out the bants, but she couldn't take them. So she would tell him all the time, you know, well, you got a little dick. Oh, you know, like, you're so insecure. Oh, you know, you got a fragile male ego. All of this stuff, right? And would literally talk about it in terms of he has a tiny penis, right? And this seemed to be fine. And then he sent her an email one day, essentially telling her, go clothes shopping, you'll feel better, right? And that was enough. That hurt her feelings enough to, that was stereotyping women enough and being misogynist enough to get him kicked off of the crisis line. And, but the reason why was because, and I think that this is actually, there is something to this. He said the reason why was because the older woman in the office had it in for him. And the reason why the older woman in the office had it in for him was because he was a little bit friendly and flirty with all the younger women, but he didn't behave the same way with her.
Yeah, that
So
actually...
literally not flirting with a particular woman in the workplace can get you in trouble.
I have seen that happen.
You know, so I'm just like, so that, like, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, and you're damned if you just disappear, right? Nothing you do is right. There are no rules. There are no, the rules are so selectively applied and so turned on their heads at certain times. You know, I'm going to get him kicked out for sexually harassing the younger women in the office because he's not sexually harassing me. Right?
Yep.
Like, what the fuck? Right? And it all just, you know, the HR departments are just like, oh yeah, fine. Right? And I'm blown away by this. Like, the lack of consistency in all of this stuff. So I don't know what we can do. I don't know where we can go with any of this, other than to call it as we see it, you know, like, I'm sorry, but that streamer Dead Moth, or whatever is freaking Mr. Dead Moth, his girlfriend she was initiating violence.
Mm-hmm.
She was throwing things at him. She was hitting him with objects. She was doing all kinds of that, right? He retaliated. He wasn't defending himself when he hit her. He wasn't acting in self-defense when he hit her, but he was retaliating to provocation on her part, initiation of violence on her part. That is something that we need to be able to actually examine. Like Bill Burr said, you know, does anybody think that Rihanna and Chris Brown in the car that day, she was just like, oh, look, a Baskin Robbins, do you want to get some ice cream? And he started punching her?
Yeah. No. Actually,
like, does anybody think that's what was going down in the minutes prior to that event?
The Ray Rice incident, too. That situation, if you saw the whole video, because TMZ had the whole video up for a while. And
she assaulted him repeatedly. She spit on him. And then when they got in the elevator, she fucking charged him in an enclosed space.
The thing that really set me off with that was she launched herself at him across the elevator.
Yeah, and then he popped her once.
She launched herself at him across the elevator after he communicated a need for space by backing off and putting his hands down by his sides. That is the signal for let it go.
Yeah,
that
and
is
then
the signal for stop.
Right.
She's launching herself at him. And he popped her once with the amount of force it would take to essentially just stop a guy in his tracks.
Yeah,
right.
And
he didn't go overboard. It knocked her out because she was coming at him when he did it.
It knocked her out because she bounced off. She bounced off into the wall of the elevator. But the thing is, he didn't even punch. He brought his hand up, and when I looked at that, it's possible that was a deliberate punch, but it's also quite possible that he was just bringing his hand up as a startle reflex. When someone jumps at you, I do that. Someone jumps at me and my fists come up. And it's not every time.
I punched one of my bosses in the face.
I sent one of my friends, actually drove one of my friends to the hospital for stitches after he jumped out of the bushes behind me in the dark in a wooded area, grabbed me and screamed. When I was carrying a monopod and with a ball head pistol grip ball mount, it has these little screws on it. And the screws are what actually sliced his scalp. And he had to get stitches in 2 places because I hit him twice. Once before I saw who it was, and once while I was still panicked after I saw who it was. You know, and then he's yelling at me, stop, it's me. And that was a moment of, like, complete and utter panic. But before I was even aware fully of the situation, other than the fact that I had been walking through a dark wooded area and somebody grabbed me from behind and screamed, I had done some pretty serious damage. Well, if I had been a big, strong guy, I probably would have fractured his skull. And because that's metal. The monopod wasn't like these newer pretty little plastic things. This was expensive equipment. This was expensive Monfrotto equipment, okay? And my camera was an older camera too. It was Nikon FG20. It's made out of steel and aluminum maybe, but it's metal. It's not plastic. And so everything that came down on his head had weight behind it and was very solid. And that was like, this was not something that I would have just turned around if I was angry with somebody and like, I'm going to beat the crap out of you with my monopod because I'm mean, you know. I look at that video and I'm thinking, with somebody getting to that breaking point and backing away saying, this is getting too heated, I need space between us, and the other person launches across the elevator at him, it's very possible that was a reflex, not a choice.
Oh God, yeah.
And but
agreed.
He still is held accountable for it, and part of the reason is because of his superior strength. Well, the problem is she's got superior strength too. It's not physical strength. She's got superior strength in another way entirely. She has that capability of not just control over herself and control over her emotions, but control over his. And control over society's response, because she has, the female tears. And she also has the vulnerability.
Well,
and
one of the things
that makes her responsible for her actions in that situation as well.
One of the things about the Ray Rice incident is she was like, yeah, no, I don't want you to prosecute him. I don't want you to, she married him afterwards. She was his fiance, right? And she was like, no, that was like, I was a full participant in that, and I don't hold him culpable for what happened, or solely to blame for what happened, right? One of the things, when I punched my boss in the face, and she was like one of the most fun bosses, but like on nights when it was slow, she would actually hide behind corners and jump out and go boo, right? And one time she did it to me, and I just freaking punched her in the face without even realizing what I was doing.
Yeah.
And she grabs her nose and she's like, "Oh, I don't think it's bleeding." And she's like, yeah, I deserved that. Because she was one of those people who was, she was very sporty and athletic, and she was no stranger to hurting herself. So, but essentially, you have to realize that there are actions that are reflexive. I mean, like the fact that when I hit my guy, he hit me within 1/10 of a second back. Right? He had told me prior to that, if you ever hit me, I'm probably going to hit you back, and I won't even realize I'm doing it. And it's because he's been attacked more than once, right? So walking down the street, he's been jumped more than once by people wanting his wallet or just wanting some violence, things like that.
And it does become a reflex after that.
He was attacked three times before he hit the age of 18, walking down the street in his own neighborhood, right? So when you're looking at that kind of thing, the fact that he hit me back, I knew he was going to hit me back, because I would never have hit him thinking that he wasn't going to, and I couldn't hold him to blame for it because it happened so fast. The retaliation, I guess, the response happened so fast that there was no way that it was anything other than reflexive.
Yeah.
Right? So you have to realize that people are people, and I think Ray Rice's wife acknowledges that people are people, and I fucked up, and maybe he fucked up, but we both fucked up, and we're both to blame, right?
Exactly, and that's I wanted to say that I think generally, like, men's aggression or men's, I'll say aggression, is reactionary, whereas like women's aggression is more calculated and intentional.
I would agree with that.
Men react well. What we know, from
that's why it's so much easier to detect spousal murder when it's male on female than when it's female on male.
I will add a caveat to that. When men's aggression is calculated and intentional, we recognize it as such, and it is criminalized. When women's aggression is calculated and intentional, society accepts that as normal.
Exactly.
It takes an extreme situation for society to not do that.
Exactly, and I think it goes back to the play on the acceptance that men are generally naturally chivalrous, right? Because you expect men to be good. So when men aren't good, it's that much worse than when a woman who is, of course, women are the exalted. They are expected to be good. When a woman does bad, there are a plethora of excuses as to why it's just not her fault. So,
Yeah, but I mean, there's also a difference in patterns in terms of, really serious domestic violence, right? Like very egregious domestic violence. And the pattern goes like this, right? When a woman is abusive, she starts by hitting, And then when he doesn't respond with any kind of, maybe he supplicates, he apologizes, whatever, that makes her angrier, and she will hit more, and she will escalate and escalate and escalate and escalate until he puts his foot down in some way, right? And whether that means that he leaves the premises, or whether he hits her back, or whether he, just essentially lets her tire herself out, I guess. I've known men who have done this, who have essentially just shot back verbally until she tires herself out, and then she passes out on the bed with her bags half packed because she was going to leave him because he's a total asshole, blah, 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 right? And but she's been beating on him the whole time, right? And so this is, or maybe she actually hurts him, at which point maybe she'll stop, right? But she can actually escalate her own violence by him doing nothing, right? Whereas men generally are they're more prone to eating it and eating it and eating it and eating it, eating the provocation, eating the initiation of violence, eating it and eating it, and then finally snapping, right? And so what ends up happening, right, the pattern seems to be that when men kill their wives, they leave an obviously murdered body, because when they were acting to do that deed, they had snapped, right? They had hit the point where they were no longer in control of themselves, right? And they snapped, and they did that. Whereas with women who kill their husbands, they're much more likely to hire a hitman, or convince a new boyfriend to do it for them, or do it in tandem with them. It really is a more calculated thing.
A lot of women who kill use poison.
Yep, poison, use means that are not detectable. So essentially, they don't necessarily leave an obviously murdered body, and they bide their time. Aaron Pitsey said something about how women can, they can sit and they can nurse their grievance, exactly. right up until the point where they pour gasoline on that sleeping man and light him on fire. Right, or cut his penis off because he orgasms before she does, and he never waits for her. And I don't think it's fair, so I pulled back the sheets, and then I did it, like Lorena Bobbitt told police when they arrested her. Right,
women don't just nurse their grievances. There is a class of women who savor them like fine wine.
Yes,
and they will go over that grievance in their heads. They will go over that grievance with their friends and family. They will go over that grievance in their journal, and every little detail. They will linger over every little wrong. They will linger over every little emotional response to it. Their emotional labor, whatever you want to call it. And they will savor it like fine wine, like the best candy, like good sex, and nurse it, and draw it out, and edge it, until they finally hit the point where they have to act on it. And I've seen women do that not just in terms of abusive relationships where they're going to kill somebody, but for other forms of conflict with other types of results. And I've made use of that because you can sort of watch somebody doing that when you are the target of the grievance, and when it's an unfair grievance. And I've seen women self-destruct over it because they miscalculated when they should climax in their grievance-gasm, I guess you could say, or how. and it's a lot of fun to watch that happen, but it's not the same in terms of, like, when you get two women who have a conflict and one of them is doing that and the other one is going, I see what you're doing, I'm just going to wait here and I'm going to lay a trap for you. And when you when you grievance-gasm at me, everybody is going to know what you did. And but women have that capability, and women have that tendency. And I'm not excluding myself either. I've done that with grievances. It's just I've realized it's a lot of work, and I'm lazy. So I've learned to let go of grudges and not carry that shit around because I just have better things to do. But I'm fully capable of it. And when when somebody puts me in a position where I feel like or consider myself to be pushed into to carrying a grievance and acting on a grievance, I resent the shit out of that.
Right. Well, I think that's a human reaction, and it shouldn't be, necessarily like, confined to one gender or the other. We stop or we forget that women in history who have been in power, because those women never existed, right? We can't talk about those women, but they were warmongering and bloodthirsty just as much as, if not even more than the men were. We forget that women, exactly. So, we forget that women do have that inherent nature for destruction, because destruction and creation are human natures. They are characteristics of being human.
Yeah, and I think because in terms of that that tendency, because Europe's queens were 27% more likely to wage war than Europe's kings, and they were also more likely to accumulate territory via conquest, right, than Europe's kings were. Historically. So we're looking at a situation where women are even more warmongery than men in that context, in that historical context. And I think that maybe part of that is the moral hazard, like Elizabeth I, she rode in front of her troops wearing armor, but it was not functional armor. It was decorative armor. She was never expected to fight. She was never expected to lead the charge. She was never expected to put her own life on the line for her ambitions in that way, right? Through actual warfare, through actual battle. And so she felt like she had an immunity from the costs of what she was deciding for others. And I think that women these days, at least in terms of domestic violence, they feel like they have an immunity. And it really does go back to that attitude, on that stream, that clip from that stream where she's essentially saying, how dare you, how dare you, how dare you hit me in the face. She's just thrown a bunch of shit at him and hit him with objects, right? And he slapped her once across the face, and she's saying, how dare you, right? She's not saying, I'm terrified of you. She's saying, how dare you? And that is really where women see themselves, is that they're immune from being retaliated against when they engage in physical conflict, physical combat. And that is not a sustainable model. That is not something that can be sustained long term. Particularly if we're going to pretend that men and women are equal, but especially if we have a bunch of laws that immunize women from consequences of their own violence, or laws and policies, when they initiate violence against their partners. It's just not, it's not sustainable.
No, if we're going to have equality,
definitely not fair.
If we're going to have equality, we have to have equal accountability. And that's going to be the hardest hurdle to get over in our society, because we have centuries of inequality and accountability, even when women were more accountable than they are today. And there have been times under which society just could not afford to exempt women from accountability to the degree that women are exempt from accountability today. But it's never really been equal. It's never really been, like, in terms of violent behavior in terms of sexual choices, in terms of resource management choices. Women's accountability has never been equal to that of men. If we have equal rights, if we have equal privileges, if we have equal access and ability to affect the lives of other people, then we must have equal accountability. And it hurts both sexes, it hurts all ages, it hurts multiple aspects of society when women don't have that equal accountability. And we do have that out where being vulnerable, being wounded, being physically or emotionally wounded is enough to get a woman. It's a out of accountability free card. That has to change if we are going to be able to be successful in the world, if we are going to be able to be considered equal to men. We don't even have to be considered identical. But accountability is not the same as a physical capability. It's not like women are handicapped in a way that makes us unable to live up to equal accountability. We just haven't had to do it. And that needs to change. And it's going to have to be women who call out that shit, because men calling it out are going to get called sexist. Men still need to talk about it, and men still need to not put up with it. But women who are non-feminist or anti-feminist are going to have to step up. Women who are traditionalist conservatives are going to have to step up. And that's going to be a hard group to get to step up, because they're accustomed to chivalry. And they're accustomed to being let out of accountability to a degree for things like resource acquisition and defending themselves and things like that. But women need to be able to step up and say, we demand to be treated as equally accountable, not just in terms of being rewarded for being equally accountable, but in terms of having that accountability applied when we screw up.
Exactly.
And we need it for two reasons. We need it because we care about the people around us, and we need it because success relies on accountability. And if you actually want to make it in the world, if you want your family to have everything that you want for your family, if you want your career to take off, if you want to actually be good at the things that you are trying to be good at, accountability is an essential ingredient to all of those things. So denying women that accountability standard is just as bad as cutting their legs off in terms of their potential for success. That is something that women are the only people that are going to be able to step up and actually promote. Men will never be able to get women to understand that. Women who already understand it are going to have to make other women understand it.
Exactly. And I see the benefit of appealing to the conservative women, but we can't forget that the conservatives in general are hypergamous just as well. They absolutely feed into that, man bad, woman good narrative, so there is a certain niche that we have to go after. There are the people that are actually awakened to the laws and what's actually happening in our countries, because we are, it's not just the US, it's Canada, it's the UK, this is a global conversation that is happening. And I think everybody just really needs to pay attention and be focused on what's happening. Otherwise, the very things that you want to preserve are going to be, it's going to slip away right before your very eyes if you're not focused and active. Paying attention is one thing. That would be, if we could get everyone to pay attention, that would be great. But if we could get people to be active, that would be optimum. So that's where my dog is in this fight.
Yeah, and on that note, I think we should go back to the super chats. But I think you're absolutely right. It's that activism needs to. We got to kick up that activism, and it does. It's going to rely on women are going to have to be accountable for female accountability. It's kind of a scary thought, but I think we can do it. It's going to have to be a domino effect, one at a time. But back to the super chats. So we have French Honey Badger gave us $5 and says, Karen, right?
Oh, that is so old and lame. That was like so 3 years ago.
You didn't say that is so wrong.
But you know what, Karen? I have to say you did not say right as many times. I was counting.
I actually have started saying it now. It's contagious.
Yeah.
No, wait.
It is.
We're women. It's contagious.
Oh man, that reminds me of that joke. That joke, little Timmy, right? He's in school, and his teacher says, "Can anybody here define? Tell me what the word contagious means?" And little Timmy says, "Oh, it's like when it snowed and my mom's out shoveling the driveway and my dad says, it's going to take that contagious to shovel the snow."
That's because she's weak.
Yeah.
Interesting Tea Gang gave us $2, and I think that's Australian because it has an A in the front. Either that or it's $2 but I think it's Australian. Karen, shine on, you crazy diamond. And that one came with the fact that we were getting super chats because you were late, so you earned us money.
But I'm not a crazy
late.
diamond. I'm not a crazy diamond. I'm a crazy lump of really, really curmudgeonly coal.
There we go. B-Rex gave us $2 Canadian and said smiley face with wavy hand. And then Master Rogue gave us $2 and said inside out, father's emotions. The foot is down. And I believe that had to do with the back and forth over nagging and stuff like that. I might be wrong on that. But let's see. Then we have Mr. Roboto gave us $2 and said, would bottled female tears protect me from D-Law? And I don't know. You'd have to.
No.
You'd have to look like a girl.
If you want to know what bottled female tears will do to you, I'll tell you. Bottled female tears will decrease your testosterone level, decrease your libido, and make you more susceptible to a sales pitch.
Boy, that really that actually would make them a commodity in terms of advertising, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, no, they should pump female tears through the ventilation systems of casinos
and at Walmart. All they'd have to do is harvest them from the cashiers. But
because all of those men wouldn't be thinking about having sex with any of the legal prostitutes in Las Vegas, right? They would be thinking about how trustworthy the blackjack dealer is, and how trustworthy the craps table guy is, and how trustworthy the roulette wheel guy is.
Actually, I've noticed just from advertisements for the local casinos, they've started having women running a lot of that stuff now.
Well, yes. Feminized faces, or rather neotenized faces, are more trustworthy. Yeah. But female tears have chemicals in them that when they come into contact with the lining of your nose, they will lower your libido, they will lower your testosterone, and they will increase your sense of trust. And they will lead you to buy into a sales pitch when you otherwise might not have.
Do you think that could be why men are so they just they don't like when women cry.
Yes.
Why they short circuit?
Yes.
Yeah, that's why they.
Oh,
One of the
yeah,
reasons why they
absolutely.
short circuit. It's very discombobulating, and you can see how discombobulating it is on their faces
Yeah.
and the way
Yeah.
their body language and everything.
Yeah, this
if I'm in
this
an
is-
argument, if I'm in an argument with a guy and I get frustrated, when I get frustrated, that's when I tear up. I will
Yes.
walk away. I will say,
Yes.
I'll be back when I can be adult about this, or I'll be back when I can act rationally, but right now I'm going to go be a girl for a few minutes and I'll be back. And you can't ask if I'm okay at that situation, because the minute you ask if I'm okay,
Right.
that's
Try
the
to hug
signal.
you or-
Oh God,
Yeah.
don't ever try to hug me when I'm crying unless you want to see me bawl my eyes out.
Yeah.
See, like for me, like the tears come when I don't want them to. It's like
But the tears are a chemical weapon.
Yeah.
They are actually chemical weaponry. So, like they come when you don't want them to sometimes. I mean, I'm sure some women can conjure them up just on a moment's notice, right? But women's emotional tears contain chemicals that affect the people around them. And that's not the case for male tears. So,
and women's tears are weapons of willpower destruction. But going on with the super chats, we have actually there's Hokey Bukisa gave us $5 and said, when men snap, the reason is often all in is because that's the only way to exact a revenge that's going to be worthy of the punishment. Sad. And that's true too. Some guys will, when they snap hard because they know they're at a point where they can't really control themselves anymore, at least not fully, and they might if they're going to go to jail, they might as well go to jail for something big rather than something small. They might as well go to jail for eliminating the problem as opposed to just getting in a hit. And I've seen guys do that in fights, where they're like, all right, well, I'm in a fight and I'm probably going to get in trouble for it, so I'm just going to beat the hell out of this guy. And I've seen that from childhood on up to adulthood. And I used to get into fights when I was a kid. I at the park, largely because I had a big mouth that didn't just manifest in adulthood, right? And so I would piss people off, and the next thing you know, I'd be in a fight, and it'd either be some girl that I pissed off because of something I said, or some girl who was fighting on behalf of her brother because I pissed him off because of something I said, and he can't hit me because I'm a girl. So, but
well, with me,
they
I
would
always,
fight.
I
But
always,
when a guy would react, he would react hard simply because he was gonna get in big trouble for it.
Yeah. Oh, if you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But with me, I've always looked at it like if it's worth bloodying somebody's nose, it's worth taking the beating for it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
and I would happily, I would savor the bruises, because, that's just a reminder that I popped that person in the nose.
Yeah.
Right. I bloodied somebody's nose. So, and I'm not talking necessarily in the physical sense here. It's like it's literally worth it to me. If I feel somebody needs to be injured, somebody needs to be put in their place, somebody needs to be, called out, whatever, it's worth whatever beating I take to do that. And when I think about the beating that I took, I just focus on the fact that I bloodied that person's nose, metaphorically speaking. So.
Listen, give as good as you get. That's what I say.
Yeah. And I
Give as good as you get.
So I had a habit of figuring out how to climb up on things that other people couldn't climb up on. That was a lot of how I dealt with. If I didn't want to get in a fight, you could still get into a fight with me, but you had to get on top of the baseball backstop to actually start the fight. So so there was that too. or up into the uppermost branches of the tallest tree in the neighborhood. One more super chat from Hokey Bukisa following up on his previous one. He gave us $10 and said, brush past a woman trying to flee the scene, months or years in prison. Shout a woman down, prison. Rough a woman up, prison. Beat a woman's ass, years and years in prison. Might as well go all in. And that is true. If you're gonna do the in for a penny, in for a pound, and this is one of the reasons I think why we hear all the time in incidents of domestic violence, women initiate more, women perpetrate more. 60% of initiation is by women. 60% of both two-way and one-way violence is initiated by women. But when men are violent towards their partners, they cause more injuries. And the injuries are more severe.
It's essentially women start the fight. When men end it, it doesn't end well.
And women engage in violence when all they're going to do is give somebody a shove, or all they're going to do is slap somebody across the face, or all they're going to do is punch somebody. The one move I see all the time, a guy says something that his wife thinks is inappropriate, and she whacks him in the chest with her closed fist, but with the back of it from beside him. Bam! Whacks him in the chest, and he shuts up. Or he'll laugh, or he'll look hurt, but he won't say anything. And men don't do those things to their wives or their girlfriends. They don't backhand.
Never.
Don't push. They don't shove. They don't poke them in the chest. And when they're yelling at them, they don't throw things at them from across the room. They don't start out by throwing stuff that's not going to do any damage. When they finally do respond, when they finally do engage in violence, it is direct and targeted because it is at that point. Now, there are domestic violence instances where there is a controlling person who is unilaterally engaging in violence to control the other person, and that happens with both sexes. It just happens to be the rarest form because it's very abnormal for people to do that to people that they have chosen to spend the rest of their lives with out of love and out of companionship and camaraderie. So yeah, of course we are going to hear that women engage in violence more, but when men do, it does more damage. It's because men wait until they are at that point where when they engage in violence, they're going to do damage before they actually do anything back. We have Tyler Preston.
Agreed.
Gave us $5 and said, men are restricted from expressing their emotions. A few moments later, oh, you feel threatened from having stuff thrown at you by your wife? Man up.
Yeah, agreed.
Yep.
Agreed.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, it's these same people who are like, men should be allowed to cry, men should be allowed to blah, 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 express their emotions, blah, 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 and then,
your wife
where's my male tears coffee mug?
Yeah.
And by the way, that means semen.
Gotta mention that.
Yep. Gotta
Only in
mention
Japan.
that. Well, not anymore now. It means semen all over the internet. And yes, I just said semen all over the internet. So there's your next quote line. Semen all over the internet.
Semen all over the internet. Somebody needs to get that. Somebody needs to get that picture of Jessica Valenti in her I Bathe in Male Tears shirt and just put the caption Bukkake Party.
Yeah.
At the bottom. So.
Yeah.
Do we have any more super chats?
I think we are done with super chats, and I think we have done the topic to death. We killed it,
guys.
I
think so too.
We battered the topic to death. How's that?
Yeah, we battered it. We beat it. We kicked it. We hit it with a lead pipe. We did so much. We raped it. We freaking all of those things. All of those anally raped it several
this
times.
Topic. We defeated this topic.
It's so wonderful that we're all women, so we'll never really get accused or punished or jailed for any of it.
Yeah, we
No,
will
we
because
won't.
we're not feminists,
No.
and feminists can get other women in trouble all the more easily. Yeah.
You know, honestly, I have a video that I'm working on that I'm hoping to have up in the next couple of days, and we'll be seeing what my response is to the whole Sargon thing, and I may end up pulling the pin on my own grenade, but
this will be
what
interesting.
are you gonna do?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Stay tuned, Badger fans.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
So everybody be paying attention to Karen's channel for this video to come out. And with that,
watch this space.
watch Karen's space too. I want to remind everybody, like and share, get us out there so that the feminist overlords cannot silence our voices.
Try though they might.
And thank you all very much for listening. Thanks to my two wonderful co-hosts for being on the show and for all your thoughts. And thanks to everybody behind Badger Talk, behind HBR Talk, that makes it happen. And good night all.